I think that we've got to seek nominations for the chair. Could we have nominations, please?
Thank you. Could I nominate, Councillor Andy Canning, Dorchester West. Could I please nominate Councillor Ezard to chair the meeting?
Councillor Stella Jones, Dorchester East. I second Councillor Ezard.
Thank you. Yeah, I accept the nominations. Is there any other nominations? Thank you. Thank you very much. I will accept that. And for sake, although we don't have to have a vice chair, Andy, who's also a chair of the other overview committee for Place and Resources, will actually be the vice chair for this meeting. And I am actually the chair of People and Health committee. So it's the combined two committees that is the joint overview committee for this evening. And we only have one item to discuss. So we now go on to actually apologies. Please, George.
Apologies from Councillors Jindy Atwell, Will Chakawata, Richard Crabb and Mike Parks.
I believe Councillors Ryan Hope and Ryan Holloway also sent their apologies to the organisers because it's half term and they've got children, basically.
Both Ryans? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Sorry. Right. Yeah, anyway, welcome everyone that's here, and it's good to see so many people, and we've got a really interesting evening, I'm sure, ahead. So, and I hope you can all take part. So, when someone wants to speak, obviously it will be, if you say your name and your ward, and the members of the committees will have the first choice to speak, and then other members in the room will speak after all the committees spoken. Okay, so that's clear. And obviously, we don't want repetitive questions. So if someone else has, asked the question you're going to ask, please don't reiterate that, and put your hand down or make it known that you're not going to speak. Thank you. We do want to make progress, so declarations of interest next. So if any member has any declaration of interest and they wish to make now, please. Thank you. We go on to number 4, public participation. There has been no questions received from members of the public. And number 5, questions from councillors. There's been no questions submitted by councillors. And number 6, there are no urgent items. So we're straight into item number 7, which is the draft council plan. And the procedure will be that each priority section of the plan will be given and reported by the cabinet member and helped possibly by officers, and then we will have questions on that particular item, and then we can debate, and any recommendations for the vision statement can be made on that item. And then we will go to the next item, and so forth and so on. So note well that the committee cannot amend the council plan, but they can make recommendations to the cabinet. The Cabinet will respond to recommendations and whether to accept them at their meeting on the 19th of November. So we've got quite a lot to get through. So at the end of all of them, collectively, we can recommend to the Cabinet what our findings are and what we can put forward as a recommendation. So that's it. We hope to get that through within 2 hours. So let's start. First on the list, I have got leader, Councillor Nick Ireland, to introduce the council plan and explain the new vision statement, helped with, I think, Matt Prosser, our CEO. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to keep this fairly short. I assume that all members either watched the webinar on Friday morning or have since watched it back online. It is available. So I'm not going to go through everything I said there. So I'll just read a brief statement out. So the council plan, which is 24-29, it sets out our vision and priorities, setting the council's strategic direction for the next 5 years and the future of the organisation that we seek to create. It's still at a draft stage, and there are several amendments already in the pipeline. It also doesn't fully cover all the statutory duties of the council, which will be added to the document for clarity. It contains a number of targets, and some more will be added. Many of the targets are specific in numerical terms, and in my view, that's a good thing. We may not hit them all, but having targets that are designed to challenge, that are meaningful, will make a real difference eventually. Targets that are easy to achieve serve no purpose and have no value. The draft is currently out with our key stakeholders for review. These are towns and parishes, voluntary sector, Chamber of Commerce, etc. And we will provide an updated and final version for approval at Cabinet on the 19th of November, as the Chair has already mentioned, and then at full council, as potentially amended by this committee today, on the 5th of December. It's based on a manifesto, and it's based on our 4 priorities. I'm not going to go through them. They're in the document. The Chair has asked me to elaborate on the new vision statement, and that's, as I described on Friday morning. I'm not going to go through it all, but it is working together to create a fairer, more prosperous, and more sustainable Dorset for current and future generations. And that embodies everything we need to do in the next 5 years. I did go through breaking that sentence down. I'm not going to do it again. It's out there. Just listen back. But you know, it all makes sense. We have a new strapline, which I agreed with the head of comms today, but I'm not going to say what it is because we're preparing some comms on that. And I'll just leave it there. And hopefully we can get through this evening with good input, but keep it brief if we can. Okay, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Has anyone got any questions at the moment? Or does, Mr. Prosser want to comment at all at this stage?
Thank you, Chairman. Matt Prosser, Chief Executive, Dorset Council. I'll keep this brief because this is really your space as elected members to debate and talk about the council plan and your thoughts around it that the Cabinet can then use to take a decision before it's forwarded to full council in December. As the leader has said, this is an important document. There was a members' webinar on Friday, which I hope members have had a chance to watch if they weren't able to join in person. But it is a really important document, not only to the council, but also to the officers of the council, because it will guide and drive our work over the next period of 5 years. And so therefore, consideration is really important that we get these things right. In particular, going forwards over the next month as we work through the actions that we'll be tasked with and challenged to deliver, and the connection, of course, through this document to the council's budget, which we set in February next year, which is obviously really important that we then get the resources. So I'll finish there. Obviously, the team are here. You've got a lot of officers behind me sitting here to support if you need technical answers to any questions, but clearly this is a space for members to debate the document, and we look forward to listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, anyone want to ask any questions at this stage? No? Then we'll move swiftly on. So Priority 1, provide high quality housing. So we've got the introduction by Councillor Jill Taylor. And so if we would like to do that, Jill, if you would.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to keep it equally brief because this is about hearing what other people need to say tonight. You've got the paper before you. The first priority we're going to be talking about is providing high quality housing. We're all pretty clear, I think, what the challenges are in Dorset. We've got a very big gap, an increasing gap between the average house prices and the average salary, which makes it really difficult for local people, especially when it comes to local working age residents. It's just ridiculous trying to afford to buy a house in Dorset, but people need somewhere to live. We've got a chronic shortage of genuinely affordable housing, which causes all sorts of problems, and we need to start looking more seriously. We already do a lot of very good partnership working, but we need to emphasise that. We need to work with partners. We can't solve this on our own. The approach basically to that is that we're going to look at how Dorset Council can play its part in increasing the availability of affordable homes for local people. I always use the term local people rather than key workers. I think local people encompasses all the people that we're wanting to help within Dorset. Key worker is something a little bit more specific. We want to look at improving our existing housing stock, and I think there's quite a lot of legislation coming through at the moment, particularly around the private renters bill, that will tell us that we have to do that, but we have to look at how we're going to do it, how we're going to afford to do it, and how we're going to go forward with it. And also having sustainable developments that will improve personal health. The very tight link between health and housing is really important, and one that we should keep in our mind's eye. If people are in good housing, they're likely to be in good health. People in poor housing are likely to be in poor health. And then that just puts pressure on the rest of the system. We're going to be working with our registered providers. We've got some really good registered providers, and the last thing I want to do is to go into competition with them in Dorset. We need to work with them, we need to work as partners. And we need to look at prevention, which is one of the other key words within this plan. Because once again, if we've got good housing, it will prevent ill health. That is so well documented. There are target measures within the paper that we've put in there, and I hope they are achievable. I hope they stretch us, and I'd be very interested in people's opinion, members' opinions on those. And we've got key actions within this as to how we're going to deliver these priorities. So you'll see key actions are looking at standards of housing, both rented and owned, preventing homelessness. We've done a lot of really good work on preventing homelessness over the last few years, and we need to keep that going. We're one of the best across the southwest at preventing homelessness, so we can't take our foot off the pressure, off the pedal. We have to keep that one going. Developing an empty home strategy, bringing more homes back into use. Implementing new models of housing delivery. That is one of the aims of the housing, homing on housing, the housing strategy that we have. And that's going to be a really interesting piece of work. Just on the homing on housing, I've recently set the board up, the member board, and invited members, specific members, to come and join that. And we should have the first meeting on that in December. Well, the other thing we need to do is to keep an eye out for opportunities. So although this is fairly prescriptive within here, if there are opportunities that come up, we should grab them. So I'm quite keen that we look at doing that. We've got a section then on leadership and how we're going to work in leadership and partnership. Partnership is key. We can't do any of this on our own. And just a bit about standing up for Dorset. We need to get as much grant funding as we can lever into this county. That may be on our own, that may be with working with RPs. It's working with in partnership. So I think I'm going to stop there, and I'd be really interested at people's comments, at members' comments on this part of the local plan.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And we have got some hands showing now. So who was first of you two? I think it was... Well, he's a non-member, so he gets to speak second. We're just talking amongst ourselves. Yes, Carol, Councillor Carol Jones, please. Thank you.
Carol Jones, Sturminster Newton. I was just interested in your comments on making the most of opportunities, because when you get an opportunity, they normally have to be dealt with fairly quickly. I wondered whether you could expand on what you felt were opportunities and how we would overcome the bureaucracy in getting somewhere with opportunities. That was part one. Part two is I'm wondering, because we're looking at the quality of housing overall in Dorset, I don't see anywhere in there about the quality of housing for those in rented accommodation through private landlords. And I'm just wanting to make sure we have that covered, because those people need to have, we need oversight in that area as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those. They're both really useful questions. With regards to opportunities, I think what we have to do is be grant ready. From time to time, grants become available from central government. We have to be on the ball. We have to be ready to jump when they're there. They're often quite short time spaces between when they're announced and when the applications have got to be in. To do that, we need to work a lot closer with our RPs. We've got 5 big RPs in Dorset, but not ignoring all the smaller ones. Just as an example, at the moment, if a grant comes in, quite often we have to go out and tender for it. We don't have the time to do that quite often, so we've got to work out ways of working closer with our RPs so we can say, we need this RP, you are a specialist in this, we want to use you for this, will you come and join us with this grant application? So that we can get the money and work with you to solve the issues that are addressed within the grant. That is something that we've really got to get nailed and one of the priorities at the moment. Just talking about quality of housing, it's interesting. There's been a lot of legislation go through on the social housing for registered providers. That is why I mentioned the private renters bill. We are sitting at the moment waiting to see what's going to come through on that. I haven't got a date that will be coming through, but that's going to put quite a lot of emphasis on the private rented houses, which, to be honest, are some of the poorer houses within Dorset. The RP's houses are really improving. They've had to improve following incidents that have happened over the last few years, and it's the private rented ones that we really need to look at. It's not going to be easy, because there's no register of private rented housing at the moment. Anybody can go and buy a house and just rent it out, and they don't have to tell the council. So we've got to look fairly carefully at how we're going to do this, because what I don't want to do is have a huge bureaucratic system that we're expecting people to come in and register their houses just because they're a landlord. But we've got to find the middle way, because we've got to find the ones who aren't working at the standard that we want them to.
Could I come back very quickly? In that respect, then, could we do something that's very public-facing to suggest that if people are living in privately rented accommodation and they feel there's a problem with damp or mould, this is where you contact, this is how we can help you, so that we really, really push that. And because that in itself could make our landlords stand up and say, better sort that.
Yes, we can do it. There's a lot of information already on our website for that. I knew you were going to do that. But yeah, we will always be pushing stuff out. Later on, I think, let me just turn around and just have a word with Andrew Billany. The private rented register that we're setting up, that will help, won't it? Sorry, can I just go over to Andrew for that? We're looking at how we publicise poor. Where do people go to if they're suffering with damp and mould in private rented?
Perhaps I can say a little bit more. I mean, we touched on it in the People and Health Overview meeting this afternoon rather. There's a whole range of actions we do around private rented conditions. So we're looking to ways to make that more accessible for tenants, but also we're working with landlords as well to make sure those standards are kept. So, yeah.
David Taylor next. Oh, Sherry, sorry. Next. All right. If we have David and then we'll have Sherry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. David Taylor, Councillor for Chalmers St Mary in Dorset Council. My question is specifically aiming at the early bit of the conversation regarding the people affording to live in Dorset. Now, the fact is that we know we have one of the most expensive properties, well, in the country at the moment. It costs 10 times to buy a property in Dorset, and I think it's 7 times in the UK at the moment. So how are we going to look at bringing affordability into the equation instead of it being a kind of a myth where we try and get it to planning and it doesn't generally happen, or if it does happen, it's been reduced. So I'm looking at some actions that we as council can enforce affordable properties to be built in Dorset for our families and our younger families as well. Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you, David Taylor. I'm not sure if it's Gills can answer that or whether it can be Councillor Shane Bartlett.
I'll start on that question. Affordability is really interesting. There are all sorts of government schemes out there to help get people onto the housing ladder. Some of them I think are right for Dorset, some of them aren't, but every person, every situation is different. The last government were pushing first homes, which come in at around about 80% of cost. I'm not sure that it will help some people in Dorset, but even at 80% of cost, it's still out of reach of an awful lot of people. Shared ownership are good. They are a niche market. Some people love them, some people hate them. There is a long way to go with those yet. But when you can buy a house from as little as 10% of the value of the house, it gets people onto the housing register, onto the housing market. 10% isn't good because basically you own virtually nothing. So there are scales up, so you can actually then own more of it. And I would hope that people will come in starting on about 40, 50%, or even more, and then scale up. But the house will stay as an affordable house in perpetuity. There are other sorts of schemes, and I think I'm going to hand over to Councillor Bartlett. Okay, sorry, I'm going to hand over to Andrew Billany for a moment.
Just as a flag for we're expecting an announcement in the budget as well tomorrow around the shift of emphasis on the affordability point, a shift in emphasis on providing more social rents and perhaps reducing the focus that has been on low-cost home ownership. I think there'll still be a balance, but we're waiting to see how that plays out. I'm not sure it's the question you're asking, but that's certainly around the activity we're getting from the registered providers and the definition of affordable. Government will be giving some grant steers around what that looks like. And I think that will probably tackle some of the concerns that are being expressed in this chamber about some of those 80% of market affordable housing products not being affordable. So the government are alert to that, I think, and we're waiting to see what that looks like as far as the investment programme sits. I mean, you'll have seen in the news there's been a considerable uplift to the affordable housing programme, which we will get some of through the registered providers.
Yes, David, come back.
Thank you, Chair. And also the fact is that I'm looking at the fact of keeping the young families in Dorset, because as we well know, we are the oldest population county in the country at the minute. And the fact is that we're finding it difficult to retain our young families for looking after our future generations of older people. We seem to be losing our youth. And that's what I'm saying, are we looking as a council to see how we can safeguard to keeping the younger families in Dorset?
Like a statement. Yep.
Okay, I think it's always going to be hard. Go on, I'll do that. I think it's always going to be hard keeping people in Dorset because it's what do we offer them? We can't offer them low-paid jobs. It's got to be the whole package. There's got to be better investments. There's got to be more investment in the economy so that people actually want to stay here. What we've got to get away from is people moving out of Dorset for university, etc., and not coming back. We've got to be able to encourage them to come back somehow or other. And can I just go over, I keep trying to get Shane to come in on the planning side of it, because that's also very much involved with affordable housing.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Obviously, the local plan isn't for night. It's something that's its own entity, and the local plan will formulate from discussions that are already taking place, from data that we're already collecting. You're right that we are losing far too many young family and children out of this county. I think the figures are still somewhere around 30 to 40% a year, which isn't sustainable. So the policies that are contained within the emerging local plan, we would look to try and address that, and to address that need for housing that is affordable within the county. We may be somewhat limited on that, but I agree with Mr. Blaney that while we're still waiting for some information to come out from government, the government does seem to have a steer towards more social housing and that provision. So we'll wait and see what the outcomes are. Thank you.
Thank you. I would say that this is also about jobs and economy, so this may come up a bit later. Sherry, please. Oh.
Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts and Upper Clarence Ward, and my question mark follows on very neatly from what we've just been discussing, in fact, and I'm looking at your Standing Up for Dorset section. Might we consider adding in here another area you might lobby government about, and that's it's slightly technical, but you'll know what I'm talking about, that lobbying government to look again at the NPPF and planning law, specifically with regard to the hope value of land and the impact that has on the viability negotiations that we have, with the consequence that we lose many of the affordable houses that have been agreed in planning applications. So that would be another one that it would be. It's difficult for government to do that, but with goodwill they could. And so that would be like one I'd like to see added into your Standing Up for Dorset, if possible.
Go on, I'll come in and I will hand over to Shane in a minute. I totally support that, to be quite honest, because the problem is at the moment with the cost of land, it's always the Section 106 houses that fall off the end, and it shouldn't be. We actually need to flip it around so we make the Section 106 houses an absolute. There are problems within the Section 106 at the moment, as in registered providers aren't taking them up in the numbers we would like them. But what I'm hoping is that something's going to come out in the budget that will help them with that. So can I just hand over to Shane?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Jesperson. As you'll be aware, Councillor Shane Bartlett, Cabinet Member for Planning, Emergency Planning, and Ward Member for Wilminster. Apologies. As you'll appreciate, Councillor Jesperson, the previous government did an overhaul of the NPPF document, and this new government has decided to do an overhaul of the NPPF document. The officers are getting their heads around the changes that have come in, but in terms of the NPPF overhaul that they've done has gone out for consultation, and we'd expect to get those findings back in spring of next year, when we'll have a better understanding of where we actually sit and what we'll be able to, how we'll be able to use that to enforce our local plan. Thank you.
We have a question from Steve Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is a plea to all the people that have ownership of the individual strategies. I personally find Dorset Council rather opaque in trying to pull data out of it to understand what we're achieving, what progress we're making. It's good to see that each of these strategies has target measures in it. My plea would be for some form of standard reporting or portal that I could go to. If it could be live, that would be great. That I can see the progress made against any of these measures at any time. So if I am in a committee that is looking at housing or was looking at the economy, I could quickly go to that portal and see where we are against the milestones that the plan outlines. That's my plea.
I will take that one, but I may need to go over to somebody.
Sure. Councillor Mercer, we've clearly failed in your induction because there is a dashboard for members of performance data which you can access. I won't say it's live time, but it's relatively live. So we'll get some information to all members to ensure you're aware of that, which you can access. I'm just wondering off the top of my head whether that's pertinent to those who are on the audit committee who will get that. But I think all members should be able to access the dashboards of information. And certainly it would be our intention to set up a dashboard for the council plan to show the measures and targets and achievements set against them. So we can take that away, but we'll have a look offline and make sure that we've not missed something and we're not talking about the wrong thing. So we may come back to you as a live guinea pig to test that, to check we've got it right.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think that we will look for that in the future about these dashboards. Especially about milestones and measures. And I know Councillor Steve Mercer is very hot on on having all these milestones and measures as evidence. So next person I've got is Councillor David Northam.
Thank you, Chair. It's Councillor David Northam, Upway Broadway in Weymouth. Sunny Weymouth this last weekend. A few points on the title. I wonder, as we've mostly been talking about affordable homes, if we could change the heading to grab the attention of the public a little bit more as locally affordable quality homes. It's a suggestion, but some more detailed points. I note Councillor Taylor's concern about competing with registered providers. I don't think we want to be doing that, but relying on registered providers coming forward as a result of market-led development hasn't really worked. You've heard about them reneging on commitments. So we need to be working with them in partnership, those words have been used, using our assets to get a greater proportion of affordable homes coming forward. Within that, I'd like to see some space created for community land trusts to either have small sites earmarked for community land trusts for the future or parts of large sites, because quite often community land trusts, they can't deliver at the scale that we really need to address this, whereas the registered providers can, but they do have a role in creating different sorts of communities. So I'd ask Cabinet to consider a little bit more emphasis on community land trusts. The other thing which has been mentioned to me before is we don't want to sell off all our assets and get left with no assets. Is there a way that we can work with registered providers to reach some sort of partnership leasing arrangement where we retain ownership, we get some form of income, but the most important bit is retaining ownership in order that we don't sell off the crown jewels, because fashions will change. I'd like to see whether that can be investigated as part of this home in on housing approach. And that's probably good for now. Lots more to follow. Thank you.
Okay, yep, I'll come back on all of those. Looking at changing the title of it, I think it's going to be quite difficult because we're also looking at housing quality. that may not be in affordable housing. So we'll give it some consideration and we'll get back to you on that. With regards to competing with social landlords and registered providers, there's an interesting point about what we do with our assets and what we do with our land. I would view that we would go in for joint ventures with them. So we will retain ownership of a lot of the land. Every site will be different, but we could well end up retaining ownership of the land, and then we can have them in perpetuity. We've got to look at the model that we're going to use, and we'll probably be using multiple models for it, because it just depends on the site and just depends on what we're actually going to be using it for. I think probably Andrew Billany would want to come in on that, but if I can just mention for a moment CLTs. We're very much in favour of CLTs. They have delivered a lot of housing in Dorset, and we're very much supporting them. I think they are a wonderful model. They are a brilliant model. And interestingly, you mentioned of taking on CLT, having a CLT within a housing development. And that is just what's happened at the end of Portland. There's a development that's gone up there that asked to have handed over the houses to a CLT there. So we can do it. That's the first one that's been done like that. And we will be looking for more CLTs across Dorset. It's getting the people involved and getting them to work. They are slow. If you want houses up within 5 years, we're going to have to build them ourselves without CLTs. But that doesn't stop us having CLTs if we're going to look longer, 5, 10 years. If I can hand over to Andrew Billany just to add a few bits on that, please.
Thank you, Jill. I didn't introduce myself earlier, so apologies. I'm Andrew Billany, Corporate Director for Housing and Community Safety. Just a little bit on the Community Land Trust, because there is a line in the draft promoting it, and I'd echo Jill's point. I think we do very well with some of the relatively recent schemes that I've done through Community Land Trust. I think the general direction of travel is to do more and work with CLTs. I think there's just general commitment to do that, and we have a good. Part of our housing enabling team work hard to try to make sure we support that activity. Point I'd make about just that, emphasise the point that Jill's made also about working with registered providers. Our approach around looking at models, it attempts to be very pragmatic. So what works. So if there is a affordable housing programme supported by Homes England, supporting a housing association to develop a scheme, then of course we'd want to encourage that to happen, and looking at ways where we'd intervene when we need to intervene. So it's essentially quite pragmatic, not meant to be woolly. It's meant to be pragmatic about making sure we're creating the best outcome depending on what opportunity that offers us. The point certainly, and in the back row as well, certainly working across the council about how we can use our assets and our land most cost effectively as well. That's very much part of the strategic asset management plan that you've heard through Cabinet last time. It's how we use that intelligently to support our objectives. Last thing I'll say, and I'll stop, is the point around, I think, where saying that registered providers have failed around market-led developments. I think that's probably slightly unfair. I think we've got some certainly the number of homes that are being developed through the registered providers is quite large through that route. Where it's failed, clearly that's controversial and difficult, and we do what we can to make sure those schemes are salvaged. Perhaps we can talk in a bit more detail of where they might have failed. But it's very much around how we get the most out of our registered providers, the most out of Homes England investment, and how we use our own powers and levers to the best effect.
Thank you both. I'm interested on how it succeeded, because it's difficult to see it succeeding across the whole of Dorset. Looking just in Weymouth and Portland, the target was 35% affordable homes in Weymouth, 30 in Portland, I think, or 25. And what's being achieved is 14%, reported in the housing monitoring. So that's not success to my mind. It doesn't mean that it's completely broken, but it's certainly not succeeding to hit its target. So it may be different in different parts, and certainly I welcome a bit more exploration about making assets available. It's really difficult to find philanthropic landowners. It's almost like a non sequitur. So I think Dorset Council has that opportunity to make some provisions for that for the future. Thank you.
If I can just quickly come back on that, I'll probably take this offline. Section 21 houses are interesting at the moment. There are problems right across the country with them because registered providers don't get grant for them. So they buy them at about 70, 80% of housing value, but they can't get any grant for them. Registered providers at the moment as well are being really tasked with making the quality of their housing better and to do the environmental stuff. They're stuck for money in the same way we are. So they either build more houses, buy more houses, or they do up the quality, they improve the quality of the housing they've got. And it's always a balancing act. I'm hoping something's going to come out of the budget tomorrow to help with that. But no, this is not just a problem here, it's right the way across the country.
Councillor Roland Tarr.
Winterbourne and Broadbane. There are philanthropic landowners in Dorset, or there are landowners who own properties which they would like to rent. And it's not always an economic thing to do. It's just not feasible because the sort of people who are going to live in those houses may not be able to afford the sort of rents that would make it economic. So there is a problem there. And several landowners have approached me and said, can we talk to somebody at the council about this problem? That if you do them all up to the best standard, you then have to charge quite high rents and people can't pay them. So there is a problem there which needs looking into. It's just part of making a plan, I imagine. Working with the landowners and people who can produce these things.
That's interesting. Tell them to get in touch with the council. We'll see what we can do.
Thank you. Does that answer the question? Roland? Yeah, thank you. We have two other councillors that aren't members of the committees. So we've got, oh, sorry. So we've got, that's the committee member, Kathy. Okay.
Got a shortage of social workers, teachers, care workers, etc. Whilst it's admirable concentrating on local housing for local people, how are we going to attract these people? Because they are not local, so they're not going to be concentrated on in our plan.
I'd be really interested to know how you're going to define what a key worker is, because just about everybody is a key worker. And I think that came very much to the forefront during COVID. To me, the most important people were the ones working in shops. And you'd never dream of saying that they were a key worker. There are possibilities, certainly through the NHS can do their own key worker scheme if they want to, and they do already in Dorchester. They have their own key worker housing. You can also say that the academies could also own housing and do their own key workers. We need to look at what we need for our employers' employment from within the council if we are going to do anything with key workers. I think to be able to do the wider stuff, to look at where we can put, say, dentists, doctors, etc., I think you're going to be struggling. There are already there's quite a lot of stuff already within the Dorset Home Choice on allocating houses. So if somebody comes into Dorset to work, I can't remember how long they have to be there, but they are eligible for social housing within a very short time if they're working. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm just looking at Andrew, see if he can remember.
I can try to answer that. I mean, without going into too much detail, I mean, the housing register has probably got limited value for people who are brand new to the area. As Jill said, you can wait, but obviously significant number of people on the housing register. What we are doing though is working with across, not isn't just health, colleagues, health, police, universities, across Dorset Council and BCP, as well as about looking to see and getting our thinking together around how to resolve the barrier that exists with not having affordable housing for new recruits, but also existing employees as well. But we're limited in what we can do as a local authority, but we can certainly help to sort of assist where there might be some health land or a university land in Bournemouth, for example, which might benefit all types. We'll always be looking for people to house where we can house people from our housing register and from homelessness, but I think there are often opportunities, and the Dorchester, the scheme near Brewery Square is an example of where we were happy to support that as an affordable housing scheme, but it's for health workers. So we do it occasionally, but it is quite a juggling act in terms of our relative priorities. I'll just, while I've got the floor, the low cost home ownership programme that Homes England support, a lot of that is marketed and targeted for precisely those kind of workers, social workers, police sergeants, people who are in those kind of low to middle incomes. That's exactly what that type of affordable housing is for. And I think you'd find a lot of those are taken up by people who are relatively new to the area, settling into a job, might be working in a care home or working in a hospital. Sorry, a long answer, but we try to do all of the balancing. Get solutions, but our primary need will always be our housing register, I would say.
Thank you. I think that is always a big problem. We have Stella.
Yeah, I think as it's Care Leavers Week, I think we ought to be aware and remember that care leavers don't have to prove a local connection. They can come from any, just like victims of domestic abuse. We have to care for those even though they haven't got a local connection.
I think that was a statement, and I think somewhere in there's something about care leavers, I'm sure, in the paper that I read somewhere along the line. But sorry, we've got two people, and I think it's Councillor Kimber is online. He's been waiting quite a long time. Paul?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Chair, fellow councillors. Councillor Paul Kimber, Portland. I've got 2 points to make. Councillor Roland Tile sort of led me into this question. First off is, as you know, a few months ago, we had a very, what I was called an exciting visit to Bridport, and we visited a housing co-op. And can we make sure that housing co-ops are not forgotten about, that they are something that can contribute, people organising and trying to build and get housing in a multitude of ways? That's my first point. And the second point is, I know at my council surgery, I know I had a lady come in to see me a few months ago that explained how difficult she was finding it to try and put a deposit down on a home. And I just wonder whether in the future we could also look into a type of advisory of trying to get people that are young people that are so important to our Dorset economy, and trying to help them, if you like, get that first step up. This person who came to see me had quite a significant deposit, but just could never ever reach that deposit because the house prices were going up further and further out of reach. So there are my 2 points, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. It wouldn't be a housing meeting if you didn't comment, so I very much welcome your questions. The co-housing set up in Bridport, as you say, is brilliant. I'd welcome anybody who wants to come in and do these sort of schemes again. And we'll look at what assets we've got to help with that. And we'll certainly support them with officers within the council. CLTs, co-housing, I think they're great. I love them. Your second one, you're talking about a deposit to buy a house. I think that is going to be quite difficult because the council cannot act as a bank. Therefore, we cannot loan money. As far as I'm aware, I'm just going to look over my shoulder and I'm just sort of looking between Andrew and Simon. I don't think, have we got any finance people here? Okay, Andrew's going to have a go at answering it, but I know when I've asked this one in the past, we can't give out loans for home ownership.
It wasn't so much. What I'd say to Councillor Kimber and others as well, that's the thing I've mentioned about the low-cost home ownership programme. Shared ownership, for example, people can enter that at 25% of value. So there are often a way to get people who can't quite raise the deposit for an ordinary sale, that we can help steer them in the direction of getting some help from for those products. So we don't. Short answer around the deposits. No, we don't offer deposits as a council. I can't think of any councils nowadays who do that. But we do steer people towards where they can get access to the housing ladder in other ways, and that's the point of the low cost home ownership programme.
Thank you. I think we're getting a bit away from the council plan, so I think we ought to be sticking to what actually the cabinet members can answer. So, and anyone that's a members want to ask questions? Members of the committee? Yeah. No, we've got Alex, but we've already got Louis. Louis, I think you're next. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, it's very admirable, and we talk a lot about housing cooperatives, 35% deals, community land trusts, all things like that. I'm of the opinion that this is all very much nibbling around the edges in the grand scheme of things. The only way to solve the housing issue in this country is for government to give us the power, the money, and the resources to go back to building council houses. It's that simple, I think, in my opinion. But obviously, we're not in that position or that situation. 70 years ago, it was quite common for normal working families to live in social housing. That is something that is very much on the decline, partly due to a change in the national guidelines on who is given social housing. It's now based on need, which is understandable, but also due to a stigma around living in social housing. I was born in a council house, all my parents were, and most of my grandparents were. Can we add something in about trying to get rid of that stigma about living in social housing that has arisen, and something I feel from where I live, but also look at who is living in our social housing? They're also trying to not change the system, but also trying to encourage the system to allow more working people and economically active people into the social housing system so that they are then kept and aren't forced to move away. Thank you.
Right, council housing, I think my personal view is that it would be a mistake for us to go into council housing. We are not geared up for it. If we wanted to start doing that, it would be, I would say, probably about 5 or 6 years before we even start delivering any. I think we're far better to start working in partnership with our registered providers. They are geared up as developers. They've got architects, they've got planners on board, they've got the whole lot. We haven't got any of that, and we haven't got any sort of housing management at scale to be able to do it. We are far better, I think, working with partners, and I think I'm very clear on that. Around the stigma of social housing, the registered providers are doing a lot of work on that. There was an act that went through a couple of years ago where they're looking at their tenants and how they engage with their tenants, how they work with their tenants. And that was part of that to try and get rid of the stigma of social housing. As for sort of deciding which people we do, we have to go on need. It will always be people who are on the housing register, and it's the people who are deemed to be in most need will get the housing. My inbox is full of people who need housing, and some of them are in dire need. We've got people in B&Bs, we've got people in temporary accommodation, and our emphasis has got to be on moving them into a permanent accommodation. The emails I get from people are really quite heart-wrenching, where they've been in B&B for a while, they've then been moved into temporary. There's often kids involved, and how do you actually work with the kids until you've actually got them in somewhere permanent that they know they're going to be there for Christmas, they're going to be there next year. So we need to work particularly with that group. When we've got larger estates or larger blocks of flats that we're letting out, we do have lettings policies for them because we don't want to put all the same sort of people all together in one housing estate unit. It just doesn't work. So when we're doing that, then we will balance communities a lot better. It was interesting, I went to the one on Buxton Road the other week, and that is a really well-balanced community because they've had let-ins plans for it, and they pull the people off. So you've got a mix of people. They often do that on bigger sites. So I think Shane wanted to come in on this one as well, didn't you?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Leary, the issue around stigma, the planning policies we've had of late, as you'll be aware, on large housing developments have pepper-potted that social affordable housing around those developments. What we've seen just lately, and I sat on a planning committee myself and I've witnessed it and I've seen it, is that the registered housing providers have started not to want to take up those housing on those developments coming forward. Quite often what's stated is that they would find it difficult actually to administer the housing and make that part of their business model. It's certainly a conversation we need to have with the registered housing providers as to why their thinking has come to that. It didn't used to happen, but it has started happening increasingly more and more. Like my predecessor, I'm a great advocate of sustainable development and good development, and pepper-potting those houses, that social affordable housing around large estates, I think is the right policy. But we need to have that conversation as to why those housing providers, registered housing providers, aren't taking that up now. And I agree with you, we need to avoid that stigma. We can create good development. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer the question? Oh.
I'll be very, very brief. Just on the issue of council housing, in terms of that we're not ready to be the wrong move, I would argue that I think the same would have been said in 1945 when we had and I know Councillor Orwell was going to nod at that, in 1945 when we had the council house revolution then. And this new Labour government, which I'm for some reason sounded an advocate of, which I never thought I would, is talking big on council housing. Can I be assured that we're not going to miss out on any potential opportunities that this new socialist government is going to bring forward on this matter?
I can assure you we weren't. As I explained earlier, we've got to be grant ready. We've got to be there to grab it. So absolutely, every penny, please.
Thanks very much. And we've got Alex. I'll come back to you, Roland, but Alex, I think, next.
Thank you, Chair. Alex Brenton, Upton and Litchett. There's a lot in this. There's nothing there you can dislike in the target measures and such like. But I do see that there's only one line in key actions which says improve the quality and standard of homes, either rented or owned. I'm aware of an awful lot of some privately owned by older people who have let it deteriorate. and many rented where they are private rented on a sort of informal basis, and the tenant does not want to make a fuss about the state of the house. Now, are we actually, it says that we can have, with Healthy Homes Dorset, we can get capital from Lendology. Is there any shortage of that money from Lendology? And are we accessing it? And and how are we going to get these? I mean, it's all very well saying we're going to improve the quality, but how? That's my point.
Yeah.
We did have the meeting this afternoon, which we discussed this paper in length, actually, I might add, with the overview committee, which will be going to cabinet. So, and I think that the officers actually not here that actually went through everything. But yeah, Lendology are the company, but they have to be vetted. Certainly have to be vetted, and there's a criteria. So that all in that paper. So if we can keep away from that, I think that's not something that perhaps the cabinet members here can answer. Thank you.
If I can just come in on that, the paper you're referring to, which I don't think you named it, is the private sector housing policy that was on overview this afternoon. Take a look at that, because that's all in there, all the loans and grants that you can get.
Thank you. Yeah, we will have to move on. I think it's Roland wanted to.
I found the whole discussion, especially what Councillor O'Leary has said, very interesting and vital that we should discuss those things. But Councillor Lugg's original question was about attracting staff to this county. And I've worked for Dorset on and off for half a century. And the big thing that's happened right through that half century is that people they come for an interview, they accept the job, they go home, they ring up the local estate agents the next day, and they ring up Dorset Council the next day and say, we can't afford to work in Dorset. Because if they're living in South Wales or North East England or North West England, the house prices are so much higher here that in spite of the fact that they're getting good promotion and would like to work in Dorset, they will be a lot worse off. And so it's a price of houses which is putting off perhaps the best people from coming to work for us, although we get a lot of good people working for us. But that is the problem which I think Councillor Lugg was drawing attention to. And I think we should include that in the plan as an aim to try and find how we get around that problem.
Can I answer that one? I think there is a sort of means test to people being on the council housing list. And if you're earning more money, then you actually do get, I suppose, to a certain extent, you don't get a permanent, and I think Jill might put me right here, you do not get a permanent tenancy anymore like you did in the old days, and you get a tenancy that gives you only the right to be there if you earn under a certain amount, or you get challenged by the amount of saying, you know, you're earning now this amount and your children are earning this amount, then you really ought to be thinking about moving out of rented accommodation or this social housing into something else. So that is one, I think that is in the affordable housing somewhere. Am I right? As I understand.
I think I'd have to check. I think we're getting off target a little bit now. A lot of this is within the Home On Housing stuff, within the housing strategy that went through about this time last year. So take a look at that and see whether that covers what you're asking.
Going into the realms of too much detail here. Have we got anyone else that wants to ask a question? Pardon, somebody else online?
No, it's time to move on, I think, isn't it, really?
Is there someone online that's looking to ask a question? Oh, Kate Weller, yes? Oh, yes, Kate.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Kate Weller, Rodwell and Wyke. Can I just point out that we've just spent an hour on this first statement and we could be here for 4 hours. I haven't budgeted for being here for 4 hours. I'm sure none of you have had your dinner yet. So could we, try to be a little more succinct?
Thank you. I think we'll wrap that up. And the thing is, we have to actually have some sort of statement that we can take forward.
Can I just make a suggestion?
Yep.
That we give to Cabinet the comments that have been made, so then Cabinet will respond to those comments.
Okay. Yes, with a bit of help from George here, the comments that have been made we will take forward and consider adding for the Cabinet to decide, certainly about lobbying the government, the actual things that were mentioned about a dashboard and several other things that I'd starred here that will be able to be taken forward, and I'm sure the Democratic Services will have jotted that down. So are we happy with that, everyone? Yes. Yeah, thank you very much, so we can move on. The next item here is grow our economy. So if we could have the Cabinet member that's going to deal with that, please. Is he not here? Sorry. Oh, Richard. Yes.
How's that? Yeah, that's better. Okay, this shouldn't take an hour for a simple reason that we had an economic growth strategy webinar on the 16th. So you should hopefully, I know there was many members there and you could have watched it again online, so you know many of the issues that the council is facing and some of the levers that we have in place. And also we should all, I think, desire economic growth. I think that's, unanimous amongst the chamber. And when the economy grows, poverty grows, providing it's done, inequality. And I think sometimes that doesn't always happen. And we see that skewing certain particular areas like finance, which won't hit everyone. So we're trying to get a growth that's fair and even across there. We also need to step into the LEP space. So we have a golden opportunity to bring more control in the way we do things, and also into the skills place, which again, I think is always difficult when things sit in sort of numerous areas to get some real traction. We know that economic growth in Dorset is poor. Productivity is really bad, and it has been for many years. We know the issues, and they all interlinked: housing, transport, skills, local plan, demographics, infrastructure, digital infrastructure, power, rurality. So we have some real, I think some really good targets within there to focus on within our economic growth strategy. And some of those areas we can take a sort of strategic view and an influencing view. Some we're very much in an enabling position. So I would point out particularly areas that we can really control. So that would be around particularly the innovation part, where there's some really exciting proposals coming forward to Cabinet. And that's been underperforming, I think it's fair to say, and it shouldn't be. There's great potential there, and there's companies doing great things, looking to expand. And we're also in the throes, obviously, with our 4 sites in Weymouth. We're out to 2 sites at the moment for a development partner. So again, 2 key areas that we have sort of the levers, real good control. But we need to be better working across our directorates. We mentioned housing and the rest of it. Well, if there was economic growth, more people would be able to afford that housing that they're struggling to get on the ladder. With the transport, local plan, all these things. And I think there has been a certain amount of tradition of working, as we all know, in stovepipes. So how we can break down those barriers you've got the targets there. It's really up to you to say, have we missed anything? Do you disagree with anything? You know, and where you want to challenge me. So I'm really interested in hearing your views. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from members? Yeah, we've got Sherry and David and Carol. And then after the members have gone, we've got Louis, but we've got David Northam here. So we've got those in that order, please.
Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts Upper Clarence Ward. Not a challenge at all, an absolute question, and I don't necessarily need an answer now. I'd quite like to have an answer perhaps in writing later. In your document here, you talk about the productivity in Dorset being 6%, and our nearest neighbours at 31% and 35% and 43% for the south west. That's an astonishing difference. It would be, I would really like to have a slightly more granular, more in-depth understanding of that figure, of any views that there are of why that figure is there. But I don't want to have I don't need to have an answer to that now, but I think it would be something that it would be very interesting to have a better understanding of, because that figure is quite startling, and the gap is quite startling. So at some future point, I would like to know more about that.
Absolutely, and it's the first thing that struck me is absolutely, well, why is that? And then there is a lot of data, particularly research that the LEP have done, and Nick Webster, I'm sure, will be able to furnish you some of the answers, but we don't have all the answers. You know, we're making assumptions on why that is. But I think there's many of those issues that I pointed to, but it shouldn't be as bad as it is. And I think to some extent, you know, we've got to say we must, as a council, do better and really take a grip of it, which is what we're trying to do, and making it a key objective of this corporate plan.
On to David.
Yeah, David Taylor here, councillor for Chalmers St Mary and Dorset Council. I've been with the council now for what, 8-9 years now, I think it is, with the West Dorset District Authority, and then we had the Unitary Authority, and now we've got the Unitary Authority again. I do remember in the midst of time when we had a fantastic day when we did a lot of challenging, discover what new businesses we could bring in Dorset. We worked for weeks and weeks on that, if I remember rightly, and we came up with even more fantastic ideas, even for another crematorium, can you believe it, in the north of the county. But that was the ideas that were being buzzed around. The ideas that are coming forward, are we actually talking to companies or groups about what we can bring forward to Dorset? Or are we actually spreading the words out there, like community colleges or universities and things like that, to actually see what we can actually bring down here? And also the fact is, have we been looking at a new town to help us with a new economy in Dorset? You know, this is a possibility which we've been thinking about for a long time, to actually bring industry, bigger industry, to our county. This is a couple of questions which are just out there.
I think the key thing is the economic growth strategy, which underpins all of this. So the new board that we will be setting up, we're about to go out to consultation. There's certainly 4 workshop task and finish groups of our members, but there's at least 6, and quite possibly 8 sessions that we'll be running with the Chamber across Dorset, across various sites in Dorset, involving as many businesses as we can, so not just Chamber members, that's really key, so members of the BID as well, and anyone we can get who's got a real interest, stakeholders, to input into this. And of course, I mean, officers are getting interested parties all the time coming to us to say we want to invest, you know, and the real issue is usually development land, which is really basically in the DIP area. But the odd pockets. The other point, I think, was very much a sort of planning issue, really, which is, I wouldn't say I can answer. Thank you.
Carol?
Thank you very much. One area that we've not touched on at all here, and I think that we should, but I don't know the data behind it, but I think we should check it out, is how, I wonder if we can try and understand how many people of working age in Dorset are actually economically not active at all. And is that down to health? Are they waiting for procedures? Is that mental health? What are we doing to get those people who could be working back to work? And in terms of, I'm going to try and bring a whole pile of things together here, because we want to keep our young people in Dorset, but I don't think many of our young people have high enough aspirations. We don't tell them that they can do a lot more than they think they can. They think they can just go into farming, or they can just go to a job in a shop, but they could do anything they wanted to. And at a scrutiny meeting last week, we saw that at Key Stage 2, Dorset's in the bottom 20% in the UK for reading, arithmetic, and so on. Now, if you're a young family and you want to move to Dorset and you've got children in school and you see those figures, you'd have to think twice again. But why could that be? Well, did you know we've got maths being taught by PE teachers because they can't afford to live in Dorset? So there's this whole circle of goodness knows what. Anyway, I've rambled enough, so I shall leave it there. But let's look at how many people of working age perhaps are not working. Why are they not working? What are we doing to try and get them back on track? And is health very much at the forefront of that?
I mean, a lot of points there. I mean, certainly employers are certainly saying to us that they don't always get the skills that they want from the youngsters who are leaving school. So that's, again, very much in the skills area. But many of it is within the communities, within children and adults services as well. So it's, again, an example where it crosses, and we mustn't just be stovepiped onto, the solutions are in there, I think, amongst us. But I don't have all the answers on that, but some good points.
I just wondered if there was any officers that would like to make a comment on that. We've got the public health member here, have we?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Okay, fair dues. I don't know if Andrew... Have a say. Andrew Robinson? No, Steve Robinson, sorry.
Yeah. I think it's a really good metric. And we're as we're looking at the targets for health and social care, which we're going to come on to in the next session, I think actually that is quite a useful metric to look at, how many people are ill that could be working and what do we do about it. So I think I really welcome that. I think it's a really good idea.
Sorry, I think I'm losing the plot here. I think we have online Simon Gibson.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry not to be able to join you in person this evening, but I'm Councillor Simon Gibson representing Burwood. I want to just talk about the economic targets in the report and to welcome them, really. I think they're a very sensible, quite achievable set of targets. Not always the easiest to flesh out as well, because as Richard says, so much of what we don't have control of within economic growth is actually what drives genuine prosperity across Dorset. But I do think, in particular, I'm very pleased to at least have a target in place to try and improve our productivity, which, as Sherry mentioned, is incredibly low, and 5% strikes me as a good place to start. One of the specifics I did want to talk about was the target to increase the number of visitors into Dorset. It talks about 1.5 million additional visitors by 2029. And growing tourism is a good ambition, but rather than an absolute figure that says we want additional tourists to come to Dorset, I believe we're much better focusing our energies on tourism in trying to drive up the gross value added, the amount of money that people spend per visit, the amount of things that they do that spends money in the wider economy, rather than a simple target on the sheer number of people coming to Dorset, because that does have downsides to it as well. So I think if we are to put tourism as one of our key metrics within economic growth, let's be going for quality tourism and high spend tourism if we possibly can. Other than that, I'm really pleased to see the continuation of the partnership working that the previous administration was so fond of, especially in the Great Southwest. I do think that's how we bring genuine inward investment into it. And otherwise, I think it's broadly focused in the right direction.
Thank you very much for those comments. I think that's a really good observation around tourism. I think the focus was really on about growing the season, and so that we don't just rely on the summer seasons, that we're extending it as far as possible. And that does mean sort of quality and different diverse cultural activities that will get people in throughout the season. And hopefully that is sort of value added. But I think you're right, you know, if it just means flooding more people into Weymouth in the summer, I'm not sure that's going to be really appreciated by the local people either. So perhaps, you know, I'd need to drill down into that and have what that actually means. But that's a good point. Thank you.
Simon, did you want to come back?
No, thank you, Chair. That's great.
Thank you. Right, I think I overlooked David Northam.
Thank you very much, Chair. We had the Cabinet meeting on economic growth strategy, and after I wrote to Nick Webster requesting a meeting to discuss the Dorset Enterprise Zone. I'm very concerned that the Dorset Enterprise Zone hasn't met the targets it set itself in terms of creating jobs. It's had quite a lot of investment in it. It's had so much investment that I don't think we should stop investing in it, but I do think we need to look at what the benefit is that's coming from it, and we need to ask ourselves, why hasn't it succeeded in meeting its targets that it set itself? I look forward to hearing where these 300 jobs are going to come from. I made a suggestion that the Dorset Enterprise Zone should be extended to other parts of Dorset, as is done in other enterprise zones across the country. I've tried repeatedly to engage on this topic, and I feel frustrated that we don't manage that. I've had conversations with developers about the key employment sites in Weymouth, and we had that translation of a key employment site into a new Marks and Spencer store. And the reason given by the developers was, we can't find anybody who wants to move to Weymouth to set up a new business. There are no incentives for moving to Weymouth to set up businesses. There are incentives to go to the Dorset Enterprise Zone. We could have the Dorset Enterprise Zone extended to include Weymouth, Portland, other places where there's land and people available. These 300 people who are going to come down for these new jobs, where are they going to live? One of the most expensive parts of Dorset. I really think we need to look at this. I would like to have that meeting with the relevant officers and the cabinet member. I requested this on the 16th of October. Thank you.
If I take that one, Simon Clifford, Cabinet Member for Finance and representing Chickerell. So the last part of your question is really the key to it. You want a deeper look at all of this, and that's exactly what you're going to get. So we had meetings today, funnily enough, on the future and some exciting prospects, and we will be bringing them through the Cabinet process, and I'm happy to talk to people outside the room on that. But yeah, it's absolutely on our cards, and there are some big opportunities there.
Thank you. That's good for Winfrith and all the people who live around Winfrith. And the commuting in from Weymouth to Winfrith is already quite extensive. Most of the people who work there have worked previously in Weymouth, and their jobs were moved to Winfrith. I just think we need to be looking where the people are and where the space is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have one more. Andrew Starr.
Thank you, Chair. We were talking about tourism just now. I think an area of tourism that we really could cash in on more is ecotourism. not for the, for one of the reasons is the fact that it's not just concentrated on the summer months like traditional tourism, people going to the beach. It's very much something that people will do in the shoulder months, if you like. And Dorset's got so much publicity recently off the BBC with the number of programmes they've been doing about how fantastically well the wildlife is doing in Poole Harbour. I think it's something we don't cash in on properly. But I'd also like to have a quick mention about the figure that really grabs me in this report is the UK average generated. If we reach the UK, bring productivity up to UK average would generate an additional £1.6 billion for Dorset. There's got to be room to improvement there if we're that far behind the average. And I know that some parts of the country, you've got their average probably comes up a lot because they've got lots of highly productive factories, which we don't have here. But we do seem to be a long way behind. Thank you.
Anyone like to answer that? I think it was more of a statement, but I would say that there's a lot of potential, but I think it is difficult because tourism is actually a summer, mainly summer activity, and we do get a big influx of people, so it does affect our economy in a great way, and we do need to actually make sure we fulfill the potential of that. So I think, Andrew, well said. Another Andrew at the back there. Would you like to speak? Oh, Steve, sorry, I'm getting Andrews and Steves mixed up. Thank you. Right.
Steve Mercer, Blackmore Vale. Could I just develop something that David Taylor talked about? There's some lots of nice words in here about established business groups, encourage that sort of thing. I wonder actually whether we don't establish a Dorset investment office that actually goes out, understands our USPs, finds the businesses that could exploit those USPs and attract investment directly into the county.
I think that's exactly what the board should be considering, and the same with what the setup that we're envisaging for the Innovation Park will be very much focused in that area of drawing in venture capital and investments from around the country.
Could I just have a plea that it's not just focused on one particular area? You know, we are a big county. Don't focus it on one particular area. Us in the north, we do feel a little bit neglected, and we have lots of high technology businesses in the north, and we can attract more.
It is difficult to share things across the county because certain parts of the county lend themselves to various economic growth. But yes, I think we'll move on, unless everybody's now finished. Have we got anyone online? Oh, we have Andrew Parry. Oh, yep.
Chair, I'll give way to Councillor O'Leary, who was before me, but I'd like to come back.
Thank you very much. What Councillor Mercer just said is one of the most beautiful things I think I've ever heard another man say in a council meeting. South Carolina in the 1950s is a very good example of this. The governor of the state set up an economic development board. They went out, they said to companies, RCA, Boeing, this is why you should come invest in South Carolina. This is what we've got. Very good idea. This document, very nice, motherhood and apple pie, very nice things in there. It's what is not in there that is questionable. I'm quite offended that when it says about traditional industries, it doesn't even mention the fishing industry. I've read all 250 pages of this document. It doesn't mention fishing once. As a historic industry, we have 3 harbours that this council looks after and maintains, not mention of the fishing industry or businesses such as Chandler's, etc., that come off of that as well. and I'm sorry about Steve about the north, doesn't have any harbour side, but you know, is an important industry nonetheless. Gillingham Harbour or Somerset Harbour. And then the thing that's only mentioned 4 times in the entire document and not mentioned by the report authors, but part of the consultation responses, and something that none of us, I don't believe I heard anyone mention this evening, is apprenticeships. Now, surely apprenticeships, council norms have people coming down here to take these jobs on. We need to upskill people that are here. I mean, I was born and bred in Weymouth, and the way to do that is apprenticeships. Mentions courses, but not apprenticeships. We really desperately need to start getting the people for the jobs as well as the jobs for the people. Councillor Northam and me have a shared employment history in the engineering sector. He was once my boss and I looked after the paper clips. And the problem with that sector is due to the fact that AWE, the old Ministry of Defence, all those people trained people up. That's why Weymouth, sorry, I mentioned that word again, has a very, very high pool of high-skilled engineers. That is ageing and it is not being replaced in adequate numbers. We really need to look at the apprenticeship schemes in terms of upskilling people. I'll be quiet now. Thank you.
We've got the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor O'Leary. We do support apprenticeships. We have 5% target of the workforce in apprenticeships, and we achieve that as a workforce. We also support local businesses in terms of taking people into apprenticeship programmes. Clearly, what this is an overarching document, and your comment, I think, says, please let's reflect apprenticeships in there. We take that comment on board, and I'm sure the committee will make that reference back through to. But let's not go away from this thinking we don't support apprenticeships as a council. We absolutely do. We invest the levy wisely, which we have to pay as part of the apprenticeships process, and we support our local companies in terms of, for those smaller companies that may not have the resources to develop apprenticeships, we have support for them to work with them to develop that. It's also a particular campaign for our care leavers as well in terms of supporting them into employment as well, which is an important part of the role we play as corporate parents. Thank you.
Well, that's really good to hear. Yes, and
thank you, Chair. Councillor Andrew Parry, West Parley Ward. Councillor Biggs seems to be wrestling with the conundrum of whether we should be chasing quality or quantity. Is it footfall or is it going to be spend? Which bits of those bits of the economy are going to be the priority in this? And if I take that to a slightly more strategic place, I haven't got the up-to-date figures, but certainly at one time, the average earnings in the east of the county were considerably greater than those who lived in the west of the county. If that's still the case, will he be looking to pour resource in to level up the west, or would he accept perhaps there will always be a differential between the two areas, providing both areas see a rise? Where's that sort of, are we going to see as these drafts develop in this plan before Cabinet, are we going to get a clearer sense of what those priorities will be?
I think we have good data on what industries currently are around, and it is actually surprising that manufacturing is actually way up in the top. Farming, fishing, no doubt, way down the bottom, I should imagine, in terms of actual, growth and wages. So we know what the areas we can't direct. We can point, we can sort of encourage, but there are defence industries that pay very well. It was mentioned that the DIP wasn't a success. Well, it's not been a success for us necessarily, but there is a very successful company there who employs 600 people with significant wages. So there is certain industries which pay it. We can't force wages to go up in the West. If it's predominantly farming, etc. But that is the conundrum of a rurality, isn't it? Where the towns are, etc., and where the rural areas, you're going to get a different type of economy, and that's the part of the interesting, area. And one of the key things that we do want to do, and is referenced in there, is the work on market towns, and that's something that's been lacking. That's always been talked about, but we really need to get going on that because I think that will help. And so many rural people work in their neighbouring towns, don't they? But yeah, I take your point. It is a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple of people still online that need to speak, and if you've spoken before and it's not too really important, we really do have to move on. We've got lots of other things to do. So, yeah, the councillor behind there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Peter Dickinson, Littlemore and Preston and Sutton Points. Picking up on the apprenticeship schemes, I was in the chamber and I heard that there is a national shortage of planning officers. Will the council look at setting up an apprenticeship scheme for council work, such as apprenticeships in planning, which I think would be very good?
I believe it's already in place from the murmurings over here. So I think that's a good thing. Sorry, we've got, get my finger away from there. Councillor Belinda Bowden on the, I think, online.
Oh, thank you. I got left off last time and I was beginning to feel my blood boiling again. Thank you. Belinda Borden, Lyme Regis and Charmouth. Strangely enough, I'm finding myself agreeing with every single word that Councillor O'Leary has said, and even with Councillor Parry, with the exception of the very last sentence describing our government as socialist. But I do think, in general terms, we have an amazing opportunity as a new administration in an area where we've got largely new MPs and with a new government that doesn't have much experience in rural areas. We have such an opportunity to be quite bold and to lobby upwards in a sort of, I feel like we're not grasping at the kind of opportunity I feel we have to show influence and to ask for radical ideas like council housing, like sustainable tourism, definitely. So that would be my point. Please can we be brave, and please can we lobby upwards, and can we not be afraid to be more bold? Thank you.
Councillor Nick Ireland, Crossways and Leader of the Council. I can assure Councillor Borden we are talking to our MPs. I have regular meetings with each individually, and last Friday we had a meeting arranged by the Chair of the Council, Stella Jones, to meet with all five. Only two turned up, unfortunately, but it was a fruitful and engaging discussion, and so that they're well aware of our priorities. And Lloyd Hatton for South Dorset is obviously a crucial conduit into the current government since he represents them.
Okay, Belinda, are you happy with that?
Yes, and don't forget the West, please. We have a huge influence locally, and we get millions of people coming from a very wide area. Do not leave us out just because we're all so poorly paid.
Thank you, everybody. We caught everyone. Oh, Dave is the last one. Then we'll wrap it up on this one. Thank you.
Well, I'm coming with an observation and a previous experience in retail marketing, banking, and basically making great successes of most of the industries. To note that when I go on holiday in Lyme Regis in January, there's a lot of people down there. And the thing is, there's three types of economy. We've got the children and adults market, we've got the OAP market, and then we've got the middle market, which is fatty with no children. So therefore, we've got a possible gauge here within Dorset where we could actually capsulate on all the markets. So therefore, I'm thinking of expansive thought process, because I actually like going on holiday to Lyme Regis in January when the storms are there, and it's great fun. And the thing is that on that one there. So therefore, we should be expanding our horizons to look at our economies to see how we could expand in them. And that's the play. Thank you.
I think that was a sort of statement, David, and thank you very much for that. Growing the economy is something that we're all really, really keen to do, and I'm sure there's lots of potential out there, and lots of people got lots of ideas. So I think that we can put that to the Cabinet with that recommendation? Kate. Kate, sorry, missed you.
Chairman, thank you. Kate Weller, Rodwell and Wyke. Can I just come in very quickly on tourism? Obviously, tourism is very important for the whole of Dorset, not just the seaside coastal areas, but for the whole of Dorset. But whatever you do with tourism, it will always be low-paid, low-skilled work, and you must be concentrating on the engineers that we used to have. Louis has mentioned this, and like Linda, I'm amazed that I'm agreeing with Louis so much. But I don't mind, because he's right. We need engineers, we need computer engineers, we need mechanical engineers. That's what we should be spending our time on. That's where the skilled work is, the well-paid work, the work that gives people a feeling of self-esteem. Working in a bar, cleaning a room, does not.
Thank you, Kate. I think we're well aware of that, and I think we should be looking at our economy in lots of different ways, so it allows people to actually learn a skill, get themselves into jobs that are really rewarding. Thank you. We can now move on to, I think this is Nick's, our leaders area, respond to the climate and nature crisis. Oh, have I got the wrong one here? Oh dear, I jumped over one.
Only on number 3.
I'm so keen to move on. I am so sorry. I'll excuse my variofocals here. Priority 3, communities for all. So it is actually now Steve Robinson. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I thought, go home. Seems no. Firstly, on behalf of Councillor Hope, who's on holiday, I send apologies. So I'm introducing Communities for All. Before I do so, I just want to, if I could ask the Chief Executive to pass on my appreciation to the comms team for how the plan is being put together. It is a work in progress, and all the stuff that we're talking about tonight, we look forward to sort of putting into the next iteration. Which is by way of saying that the work for Communities for all is on the basis of communities for all ages, communities for all backgrounds, communities for all abilities. And that is quite a big stage upon which to walk. And so there are subsections that we want to talk about. So I'll talk first, just introduce the principle of Communities for All, and then Councillor Sutton will talk about children's services, and then I will follow up a little bit with adult social care. I spent 40 years of my life working in charities, setting up nurseries, working in YMCAs, working in the criminal justice sector, working in the housing associations, and working in the care sector. All of them, charities. And every single charity I've worked with has been applying for funding. And every single charity has had this same cry go out. Why won't they listen to us? Why is it so difficult? Why have I got 2 days to fill in an 80-page application form for £500? The bureaucracy that's involved in getting money to support charities is huge. And one of the principles that we want to look at within Communities for All is how we remove those levels of bureaucracy, how we stop telling local areas how to do stuff, and we start listening to them about what they want to do to achieve our objectives. So we're trying to reduce the layers of bureaucracy. There's a paper going through Health and Wellbeing Board at the moment called Thriving Communities. And this is focusing on how we can reduce that, how we can say to every community, okay, I'm going to say it again, Weymouth is different from Shaftesbury. So let's have a different solution in each area. How do we do that? Not by telling them what the answer is, but by going to the local council, going to the local charities, going to the local people who haven't even formed a charity yet and saying, what are the issues that you face? Local teachers, local councillors, local GPs, and saying what will work in your community, and then enabling them to meet their own needs themselves. So there's an awful lot of intention within this to empower local communities. Not completely freely, because we still have our objectives to meet, but within a hugely reduced bureaucratic process. That's the overarching thing. The papers inside, we can talk about maybe a little bit more, but that strategically, that's where we want to be. And that's why it's currently quite unformed. That's why the targets aren't yet quite set, because we actually need to have that discussion with other councillors to find out what are the issues that are going with you, and then it will come together into overall issues that we can then have key lines to talk about. So that's the introduction for how we want to work with local communities, how we want to work with local charities. But there are two big ticket items within that. One is adult social care, which I confess is obviously the most important one. But the second one is not that least important, is children's care. And I hand over to Councillor Sutton.
Apologies, everyone. We're there. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about what is in the plan because you've read that. Clearly, what I'm going to talk about is what isn't in the plan, what glaringly obviously isn't in the plan, which is the targets. And there's been quite a lot of talk around those this evening. So from a children's services perspective, Carol's absolutely on the money. Increasing educational attainment levels to at least the national average by the end of the administration is absolutely essential. Obviously, we gave that a really good going over in scrutiny last Thursday. I mean, some of the data on that you've already highlighted, Carol. Key stage 2 reading, writing, maths in the lowest 20%. And another one particularly jumping out is closing the attainment gap for disadvantaged students, because we're currently 8% below the national average, and clearly that simply ain't good enough. So that is clearly going to be one of the targets, although we might want to refine it a little bit, and I would appreciate your comments on that, but comments that are related specifically to the council plan as opposed to in general. So it's not really so much at this point how we do it, it's what goes in there and how we measure it. Although I will make two comments on the, well, one comment on the why we do it. So obviously, you know, not only does it impact on our children's futures, but again, as already been said, it's also about attracting teachers to the area, wanting to work in schools that are better, wanting younger teachers to come here because they're putting their kids through those schools, which have, you know, a better track record. So there's a circularity in that, you know, better education, better teachers, better education. You know, there's no magic bullet, but it needs to be done, that's for sure. Bringing in young families in general. In terms of how we do that, and this is the bit which I don't want to discuss too much this evening because it is about the plan as opposed to the how, but obviously sharing best practice from our highest achieving schools, you know, across lower achieving schools, and seeking a better deal for Dorset as part of the F40 group, which represents the 40 lowest funded local authorities, to increase pupil funding per capita. So that's obviously going to be in there, you know, no shadow of a doubt. What's also obviously going to be in there, and again it's been referenced across this chamber tonight, is expanding the number and range of post-16 internships and apprenticeships for our young people, including those with special educational needs and disabilities. Again, it's got to be in there. You know, we need something firmer on the numbers. That's for sure. But it's a no-brainer that it's going to be there. Obviously, you know, starting points of working with local employers and education providers. But again, I'd rather save the conversations about the how for somewhere else. But I'm happy to if you want to ask them now, then maybe we could pick them up after, given, you know, Kate and Councillor Weller's point and what time of the evening it is already. And so I'll only make one more point at this juncture, I think, which is across the whole council plan as it's written thus far, there aren't very many mentions of children and young people. But as I said at the webinar on Friday, clearly our young people have built into absolutely all of this. You know, if there's no affordable housing or economic or economic opportunities, children, young people aren't going to stay here and they're not going to move here, perpetuating the cycle of an ageing population. And again, as I said last Friday, our current children and young people are going to be bearing the brunt of the impact of already baked-in climate change. And, you know, talk to your children and young grandchildren, you'll find it's probably more important to them than it feels to a lot of us, and that's because they can see what's coming down the track as they grow into adulthood. So I'll leave it there. Questions are welcome, but I'd really, if it's a question that's not directly related to the council plan, it might be a good idea to save it for another occasion.
Thank you, Claire. If I can finish off, and in a similar way for targets for adult social care, one of the challenges we've got in setting targets for adult social care is that we work with partners. I'm going to cough, excuse me.
I think Claire wants to come back. Just you, love.
No, completely my fault. Sorry, social mobility. That's the other no-brainer. There was social mobility in there too. Thank you.
Very sorry. So one of the challenges is targets, I'm going to have to cough again, is working with partners like the NHS and working between different authorities as well. But some of the targets that we are talking about adopting are going to relate to fundamentals of life expectancy, healthy life expectancy, the percentage of the overall population that's in a care home, percentage of the overall population of over 65s in a care home, numbers discharged from hospital and successfully resettled, numbers of people using day centres within communities, some wider issues around smoking, blood pressure, obesity, mental health, respite care, supporting unpaid carers, recognition of children who are carers, issues around community cohesion that we need to think through, social prescribing data and reduced pressures on GPs. Here's a really good one that I thought of earlier. The percentage of those of working age who are economically inactive. That just came to me earlier in the meeting. Thank you, Carol. Now, some depends on communities finding their own solutions. So we're not going to be overly prescriptive in that, but what we want to do when we work with them, we want to agree what the targets are on an area-by-area basis. So I will stop talking now, otherwise I'll carry on till 10 o'clock.
You can keep them fairly short and contrite. They'll be very nice. Thank you.
Councillor Northam, Upwell Broadway in Weymouth. Just on page 9, it says Dorset is reportedly one of the least socially mobile areas in the country. I'd just like to correct that. South Dorset is the least socially mobile parliamentary area in the country. That's the fact. It's not so bad in other parts of Dorset. You know, South Dorset was the 633rd worst constituency in 2017. So it's quite old data, but I don't think it's significantly changed, and that's a sadness. I like the paragraph as a whole, which talks about averages hide local pockets of deprivation. That's really important. That's me. Just a comment, correct that, please, and I'm happy. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, duly noted. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Stella. Yeah. Did Stella? No. No. Carol and David Taylor.
Something, this isn't for discussion now, but I just wonder whether we should get it in here somewhere. And something popped up on the newsreel earlier saying that the growing amount of money being spent on SEND is just growing, it's just exponentially, but not delivering the results. And I just wonder whether we need to get this in there with some sort of measure or to look at that more closely.
The problem with that is that we're so much at the mercy of what the government decides at this current point in time. It's a national issue. And actually, Dorset is performing really relatively well on most SEND metrics. That's the problem.
Well, it's good. It's a good problem if we're
Yeah. What I would suggest is I talk to my colleagues, Paul and Amanda in particular, to think if there is actually something realistic that will help us sharpen up, but without diverting resources from areas where we're doing relatively poorly, if you see.
It's not a case of particularly looking at reducing our spend, it's are we getting the bang for the buck?
Thank you. We have David Teller.
Just a couple of observations, really. The fact is that we're talking about social cohesion and the aspect of educating our children, our youngsters. We've just had an amalgamation of Weymouth College and Kingston Moor, I do believe, and we're looking at the investment coming down from central government to make education more available for the local area. But also the fact is, if I remember rightly, we had a comment last week, whereas we as Dorset, compared to BCP, are the worst invested county from central government for funding. So therefore, we've got a little bit of a keystone there to actually go back at the government to say, you ain't giving us the money. And the thing is that, and therefore, I think this is where we stand, where we're getting lots of problems. And that's what I want to say, money.
I've already said that, actually, by the F40, yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone. I think that's it for communities for all. There is a couple of points that we can take forward there that actually we will check on at the end. But otherwise, I think there's quite a lot in that paper that encapsulates most of the things that were commented on. So thank you very much. So now we can move on to priority 4, which is respond to the climate and nature crisis. And I think that's our leader, Councillor Nick Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Nick Ireland, Crossways Ward and Leader of Council. And one of my roles is to address the climate emergency and the environment. I'll take it as read that you've actually looked at the document. There's a lot of detail in there. There's lots of targets. I don't really want to get into a debate on whether a particular target should be, 1 year higher, 1 year lower, that sort of thing. I'll just give a very small introduction. So addressing the climate and nature emergencies is vital for the current and future generations. To protect lives, livelihoods and ecosystems. The planet will survive and recover, but we won't. Whilst this is a huge global and national challenge, many solutions are local. Dorset has a key leadership role, and to drive real change, we need to support and empower our county's organisations and communities to do the same. This plan sets out at a high level what we'll be doing to make this happen, and it will be underpinned by an updated climate and nature strategy plan, as will everything else you've heard tonight, the plans underneath everything. I'll just leave it there. Happy to take any questions. Yeah.
John first.
Thank you, John Orrell from Melcombe Regis, which is Weymouth Town Centre. It's great to see this in the plan. It should be, because it's really important. And many of the actions that come under climate change will actually deliver our other targets, like some of the housing stuff. If we get the insulation right on existing and new buildings, we'll help the climate, we'll help our people. Same with the engineering and the jobs. If we get this right in terms of engineering, we'll be building turbines using our skilled engineers on our coast, on our hills and in our seas, because we've got a very reliable tidal race off Portland and we ought to be capturing that for energy. So there's great opportunities for the other areas, which we've already talked about, by taking climate change seriously. I noticed many of the targets are to do with Dorset Council, which is fair enough, because those are things we could influence. But again, I think we need more ambition. And I noticed it says working with the farming community to support sustainable farming. To be a bit more explicit, we actually need to be moving to a plant-based diet. So that's the implication, which again is good for planetary health, probably good for animal welfare and also good for individual health. A more plant-based diet is better for us as well as the planet. Some targets also on reducing use of pesticides. If we're talking about nature recovery, we got to go away from neonicotinoids, which are currently devastating our insects. So a little bit more ambition in terms of the targets. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, Jonathan. Councillor Orwell, I should say. We're definitely not going to put something in the plan that says we need to be vegan or vegetarian. Yeah, it's not going to happen. And this county is part of the Southwest, and the Southwest is one of the largest producers of food for the nation. You know, I agree. You know, it'd be better for everybody if we ate meat less, to be honest. But you know, that's a choice, and it's not Dorset Council's role to drive that agenda, I'm afraid, and we're not going to go down that route. In terms of lots of things we can do, we can't do, if that makes sense. So we're reliant on national planning policy framework, all that sort of stuff about solar panels. What are the big options? I think a real possibility for lots of high quality jobs, lots of employment, are things like the Celtic Sea wind turbines, floating wind turbines, which are currently going under a tender process at the moment by national government. Places like Portland Port are crucial to that, the success of that, and that will generate a huge amount of jobs in that area. Yeah, I take it on your board your comments, but we're not going to go down the vegetarian route, I'm afraid.
I think we've got Belinda, and then we've got Louis. Was it? Oh,
Got all about me, haven't you? I would just like to develop the theme, which is the main theme is ecology and stopping global warming and nature. I cannot agree less with the definition which was given of tourism just now. The tourism in Dorset, in Weymouth particularly, is appalling. It lasts for 12 weeks of the year, and the rest of the year people are out of work or on very low salaries. That's why it's a low economy tourism. Proper tourism, which depends on things like Spring Watch and Winter Watch and all the programs which people are doing, which need some of the best technicians and broadcasting people in the world are working on them in Dorset and benefiting our tourism industry. Wildlife, we've got some of the best nature reserves. We've got a World Heritage Site, the Jurassic Coast. It's not the only one in Britain, it's the only natural heritage site in Britain, but that needs correcting in the report. But it is a very, it is the most beautiful coast in the world, isn't it? So there's no doubt about that. That should be combined with the sort of tourism which goes on all year round. I think I've always said I write the Coast Path guides for the South West Coast Path. I walk that path sometimes at Christmas, and there are crowds of people out on it. I pass normally 40 or 50 people a day, and that's going in one direction. So every little bit of the Coast Path, that's why it adds up to millions, and it adds up to millions of pounds worth of income for the counties it runs through. And the people who are doing that Coast Path, the engineers who work in our engineering department, who maintain the thing, the people who put up the signs, the rangers, the guides who do the guided walks, all that sort of thing, they are not underpaid, they are not poor. And very often they get a lot of enjoyment from that work. It can be a really interesting and rewarding career, and it could be a major factor in Dorset's economic redevelopment.
I'm not sure there was a question there. I think we were going back to the economic development. But you know, if we enhance nature, if we enhance biodiversity, it will make Dorset a more attractive place to visit.
Can I just say at this juncture, and I know all of you will have heard it, that it's been in the press, that we are the greenest county and doing the most towards being, climate savvy. And I think this is something that we can take forward and really enjoy. And I think that it's something that we've been working for. And every one of you, it's so important that we actually appreciate that we have worked very hard towards this over the last 5 years. And I must say that the previous administration did a lot towards getting this where we are today. So I think that everyone involved has done a good job. We've just got to take it forward and really go leaps and bounds into the future. And as John Orrell was saying, we do need the more, less fossil fuels, more wind farms, more solar, more all of that sort of thing. So it's really important that we all take advantage. And as for nature, we have got the most beautiful, unique nature in the whole of the country. So we should celebrate that and really, send it out there to everyone else and say, come and see us. But we have to manage it and, to our advantage. Thank you for I think we have to, I think the Belinda, I said, Sherry, sorry, we missed you.
It's okay, I'm getting used to it tonight. Sorry, thank you. I take on board everything that's been said, and I agree with my colleague, Councillor Orrell, that we do need to be more ambitious in terms of the wider county. Instead of, I feel that this is a little bit too inward looking into our own operations, which are great, but there is a lot more we can do at a county level and show ambition and leadership in that. And can I please take the opportunity to invite everybody to come along to Dorset COP on Friday to hear lots more about what community groups and town and parish councils and county-wide action networks, as well as Dorset Council, are doing to work together. Dorset Coast Forum on last Thursday, there were some really startling figures about the climate impacts are more intense, more often, more serious than even the climate scientists were predicting. And so adaptation and community resilience and how we all work together to adapt to the known baked-in effects is really going to come to the fore. And we need to be quite explicit about that, Belinda. I feel.
We have to stop you there. We have to move forward. Thank you. Right, Sherry.
Thank you very much, Sherry Jesperson, the Hillfoots and Upper Tarrants Ward. Yes, just very quickly, I mean, obviously we can take it as read, the support for everything that's in here, otherwise we'll all be here all day. What I don't see quite enough of in the wording here is, so you talk about adaptation plans for each service, which I take to mean how each part of the council is going to contribute to the council's adaptation towards reducing our emissions and so on. What I don't see enough of here, and I'm wondering where we might look for it later on, is what the council is going to do to support our communities and our residents to deal with the impacts of climate change that they're feeling now. I'm talking specifically about flooding, but also droughts and fires. Wildfires are also mentioned, but in a ward such as mine, it's particularly very serious flooding that is relatively new to Dorset. There's that whole area of climate resilience, which I would like to see addressed somewhere in this set of priorities, because actually that's the thing that's happening, climate change happening now, and our residents have nowhere else to turn but Dorset Council to support them with those impacts now. Thank you.
No, we do have lots of officers who are working on that sort of thing already. Obviously, we have flood risk managers. Highways are looking at flooding. The harbour walls in Weymouth. We're talking about Weymouth again, obviously, but applies to any particular port. There is a huge risk of flooding because sea levels will rise. And I don't know if the exact figures, but every bit of ice that melts in the Antarctic and the Arctic, the sea goes up. I did have a message from somebody just in front of me, but it's now gone. But we are looking at doing things, and there is a plan And but that's one of the things that sits underneath this, you know, in more detail.
All right, Louis?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We've talked earlier about economic development. What concerns me, and one of the reasons I voted against both emergencies that went before this council, is this ends up dominating completely everything. On the subject, this policy is partly related to the nature emergency, and it is included in this document about renaturing, reverging, etc., etc. If I was looking to invest in Weymouth, for instance, I hate to use that phrase again, but in my ward, you drive through my ward in May, June, or parts of July, you're looking like a jungle. It's not a very attractive place to invest. And in many places, what concerns me is if we are increasing that idea of allowing things to go back to nature, it makes it very unattractive for people to come and to invest. On the subject of tourism in Weymouth, I worked there when I was at college and at school, and it provides employment to a lot of people, which is better than no employment. So it is still important, and we rely on Weymouth's attractiveness and the county's attractiveness to encourage visitors. In the Telegraph today, Dorset was rated the 8th most beautiful county, and obviously it's the most, in my opinion, but it just goes to show that we are thought of well, and we must maintain those standards. On the subject of farming, and the push for renewable energy, what I do not want to see, and I've always opposed on planning committees, is this push to turn agricultural land used for farming livestock and crops, and one of the few councillors in Weymouth that has farmers in my ward. We need to keep that land available for farming to produce food, yes, including meat, I'm afraid, delicious meat. But also other things to be more self-sustainable in our food, which therefore does help with the climate measures. So what I don't want to see is this council push at all costs wind farms, which would affect our World Heritage Site in many aspects, potentially just as the incinerator will. And we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is very important to the leader. I understand that. He's pushed this time and time again, and it's close to his heart, and I understand that he has the mandate. But please, can I have assurances that we're not going to throw the baby out of the bathwater in regards to everything else must be sacrificed on this altar?
The quick answer is we're not sacrificing anything. It's everything together. In terms of for your example about the grass verges, that's just one of the policies we have in highways to address climate change. It actually works. It reduces the costs to the council as well. A lot of people think the flowers are quite pretty, to be honest, on the Leaf Road. In terms of using land for solar panels, that is a planning issue. It's nothing to do with, it's not a policy of Dorset councils. As you well know from our experiences on West and South planning, it's something that comes out of planning. We will, as a council, look to put solar panels on land where it's suitable. I don't see why we shouldn't. Offshore wind turbines, chances are they'll be quite a bit offshore these days, and the ones we're looking at in Celtic Sea actually aren't even off Dorset. They're actually off Devon and Cornwall. It underpins everything. It doesn't get in the way. It's part of what we do, and if we don't think about climate and nature and everything we do, then we'll fail.
We have Jane and then Andy, or the other way around, if you wish.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I just want to talk about water quality, which is obviously of high importance and in national headlines, as we know. And I see in the document there's a strong focus on working with farmers to better our water quality. I wonder if there's a room for you to consider the lobbying of actually water companies, because it isn't just a farming issue, and laying blame on or laying suggestion that this sits wholly with farming, I think is not that helpful. So could we look at lobbying of water companies? It appears that the River Ewan is regularly having raw sewage dumped into it, which is obviously causes huge concern for many of my parishes who have that running through. So just to sort of move away slightly from that narrative around farmers and to focus on those water companies, if you could add that in, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Sumper, and yeah, we'll take that away and work on that. And we will do that. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't entirely sure where to place this question because I was listening for the 4 component parts that have been in discussion. But I kind of reflected on the fact that in Dorset Council, there are some 450 services provided. And I just wonder, and particularly a large amount of that sits within Place Directorate, which I think we've heard relatively little from this evening. And I just wonder if the committee felt that there was enough prominence given to the services the council provides inside what we are basically creating here, which is a contract, a pledge to the public. And perhaps the committee would be of a view that perhaps the gauntlet that we need to throw down to the leader in the cabinet is that in the final draft, we really do see all 450 services totally embodied in the work of this. Because it will be, if you want to achieve what you're setting out to achieve, we've got to ensure that that is covered in every step of the way and our residents can have confidence in it.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I don't think it comes under the climate and nature discussion we're having now. I think there's a bit of on the agenda AOB or anything else that hasn't been covered by the 4 priorities. But yeah, but I don't think realistically we're going to list every 450 and say what each of them have to do in an overarching strategy plan. We do have plans that sit underneath. Each directorate and each corporate directorship has a plan, and that's where they sit.
We have covered everyone now, I hope. Who? Oh, I'm sorry, Alex. I'm sorry, missed you out.
Thank you, Legit Upton. Having followed a lot of the climate change discussions and such like, it becomes very clear that for the next few years, we are going to be having more of these unusual weather events. We will be having more storms, possibly more frozen times, possibly more droughts. In my patch, we well remember 2020 and the Heath fire that took out an awful lot of Wareham Forest. This is going to keep going. The experts say that until we actually reach net zero, we cannot expect improvements. We have to learn to adapt. And in the strategy and the targets and everything else, it's all very well, but you could make a bit more point about adaptations. You're probably already doing it in the service areas, but I think it would help just to put in that we, as a council, are preparing plans for adaptation, and also that we are going to take the town and parish councils with us, because a lot of small adaptations at town and village level can help a lot. And you don't really mention them apart from support them to take action to recover nature. How about supporting them in plans to be more climate resilient and take small and necessary adaptations? I just think it would encourage parish and town councils to feel this is for them as well as for us.
I think we already are doing that, to be honest, and it doesn't say so. But we also have a climate nature plan that sits underneath this. It's very high level, and we are looking at everything we can do. And it says we're going to support our communities.
Thank you, everyone. I think actually that is something that I thought that we need to actually make sure that everyone can make a difference in Dorset. Every one of us, as David Attenborough has said many times. So we can make a difference if we all do something and to actually change our habits. And that's what it takes. We've got to stop being so selfish and get on with it. Who else wants to speak?
just on the last point, I've just had an update, helpfully, from one of our officers online. So this is from Stephen Ford. Thank you, Stephen. He basically says that when we started climate work back in 2019, 2020, we were focused on 90% mitigation and 10% adaptation. We've now moved to 70-30 because we recognise we need to do that. We have resources allocated already to do that, and we will be working with communities and develop an adaptation plan. Adaptation is one of the 3 strands of the climate and ecological strategy, i.e. the document I was referencing. So.
Thank you. I think this is very ambitious. Did Kate want to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Kate Weller, Rodwell and Wyke. Are we going to have an opportunity? I haven't got a specific thing to say on climate, but overall I wanted to say something that be very brief, and I'm assuming that we'll have that section in just coming up any minute now.
Yes, we haven't had a debate on this that we can throw different ideas around and then come to a conclusion. But I think that might be something that we do. But I think we've got some ideas of what will go forward. But most of the things that have been mentioned that I've found are actually in the document already. In quite a lot of the smaller print, if you know what I mean. And certainly we're all working towards that. So I think that we can wrap it up. But if you wanted to say something particular, then... There's an AOB section. Yes, there is an AOB section afterwards.
If that's all right, Madam Chairman, thank you very much, and thank you very much, fellow members, for any indulgence that you allow me now. There's absolutely nothing anyone could vote against in this vision statement, is there? I have to say I question the word vision. It's nothing contentious. I listened to the presentations on Friday. I've listened again tonight, and I'm still waiting for the how. There's lots of cliches. Working with partners. I've been on planning over 20 years, and I think I've never, well, very rarely certainly, met an altruistic planner, an altruistic developer. So good luck with that, with working with partners. There have been some excellent comments, some excellent suggestions, so I'm really looking forward to seeing those incorporated in the final draft when it comes to full council. I think that would be great. I have one thing that I would question particularly, and that is right at the very early part of the paper, it says cross-party, working cross-party. I have to say there's been no Labour inclusion. There never is. So I hope that this plan, when it comes through, will be something that the Labour members can get behind, and that those people in Dorset, I know hell will freeze over before Dorset becomes a Labour-run administration, but there are people in Dorset who do vote Labour, and I'd like them and I to be able to support this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you. I do think that if there is anything at all that we need to do that, all the comments, George assures me, that are positive ones that aren't in the plan that people have put forward will be added and put towards the Cabinet for a recommendation. So we can only actually collectively recommend to Cabinet all of those suggestions. The other thing on here we've got is the remainder of the plan, including anything that we haven't already discussed. So if we can keep that really short, so that, and also including how the plan will be delivered, but I'm not sure what that actually means. George? Oh, is there a section that's in there? Oh, perhaps our leader, he's frowning, so I'm not sure he understands that.
Just the remainder of the plan that we haven't talked about. So
Oh, I see. Ah, right. No, I'm a bit mystified, but I think Sherry would like to have a word.
Very, very brief, Madam Chairman, if we're still doing general comments at the end. Very brief, and I don't expect an answer. I'd just like some attention paid to this in the next draft. There's not a single mention of elected members anywhere in this report, and elected members surely have a key part to play in some of this. So if this is the council's report, I would have wished to see elected members included in it more explicitly. I don't need an answer. I just leave it there. Thank you.
I would say that was a given. I don't think you have to mention it.
If this is a document for use by the public, nothing is a given. It should say so. Thank you.
Thank you. Noted. Right. So any general comments about anything we may not have actually included so far, or hasn't been, included in the whole thing that anybody wants to make a comment on? Right. Any of the committee at all? No. So we've got Simon Gibson and Belinda, I believe, online. So Simon first.
Thank you very much, Chair. Echoing a little bit of what Kate Weller said, is there's a lot to agree with what's in the plan. It's as always the stuff that's not quite in the plan that perhaps needs the most attention. And before I say this, I understand that not everything can be a priority, and the old saying, if everything's a priority, nothing is a priority, it still holds to be true. That said, one glaring omission, I think, is any substantive mention of our highways. This is one of the big universal services that all of our residents use. It's something that the old previous administration very proudly had a good record on. We often fared very well in the national comparisons around our road maintenance, especially in comparison to some of our neighbours. So if I was a member of the public and I was looking at what the council's priorities were through their council plan, I'd want to see more than just a passing, glancing reference to it. So perhaps not for discussion now because it's been a long meeting, but when this reappears at Cabinet, could we see more about what the administration's intentions would be for highways? Because I'm fairly sure if you ask the public what their priorities are, it's right at the top. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Simon. Should we go on to Belinda then, please?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with both the previous speakers. I think we do need to be explicit about elected members. I think we do need to be explicit about highways. And actually, I was going to say, I think we need to include, I think what underpins all of this is an aspiration for a much better connected public transport system, as well as a very good highways network. And it really, really matters to people if we want to reduce inequalities. It really matters to the rural areas and to the us poor people out in the West, and also the aspiration to reduce poverty and to include our communities. It kind of underpins everything. And I think I have already made the comment that although we talked in the first pages about communities for all, I don't think we didn't specifically mention town and parish councils until about 3/4 of the way in. So I really would like town and parish councils to be much further forward in the report and made explicit, along with elected members, if we are genuinely going to feel included with our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. Any Cabinet members want to comment?
On Communities for All, yes, I agree. It will only work if we all work together. So I have no objection and support that completely.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I think we can sort of wrap it up there. There is some notes that we will put together, I will actually get together with George and the Domain Friendly officers and then put that together so that we can form a form of words, or do we want to put a form of words together now?
I just want to say a point of procedure. So all of the comments and suggestions today from the council plan will be taken forward to Cabinet on the 19th of November, where Cabinet will respond to comments and suggestions to go in the draft council plan. And then it will then go on to full council.
Well, thank you all for your time and coming along and taking part. Have a good journey home and take care.